Hey everyone, welcome back to the Thing About Wildlife in a Nutshell, where you will hear a bite sized story from our guest wildlifers' time in their field. Our lives among nature tend to be a string of funny, intimidating, or simply absurd anecdotes, and I'm going to be bringing these to you through some wonderfully diverse and fascinating voices. In today's episode, you will be listening to a conversation I had with Mrunal Ghosalkar, a former colleague and now dear friend. While she has been working as a conservation educator for the past 4 to 5 years on various projects, she began her journey with the Nature Conservation Foundation on studying occupancy of hornbills through interviews in Northeast India. She later started a program called Janata Waghoba in rural Maharashtra with Wildlife Conservation Society India to build awareness about leopards in human dominated landscapes across various stakeholders. She has also worked as a project coordinator for the Wild Shale Environmental Education Program at the Center for Wildlife Studies, and now she is working as a conservation education manager on the Great Indian Bustard Program with WCS again. Mrunal has shared several stories with us in today's episode, including a couple in Marathi and Hindi. If you don't speak these languages, worry not. I've included some translations as well, although they may not be as spirited and flawlessly narrated as the original ones in Mrunal's voice. Hopefully, I've done them justice. A quick shout out to Avishkar Munje, who helped me ensure I got the Marathi translations right. Thanks, Da. And now, on to today's In a Nutshell, the thing about people and animals. Hey Mrinal, it's so wonderful to have you here on the podcast. How are you doing?
Hey, Shika, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so grateful that you're chatting with me, though you're currently busy and away in the field in Rajasthan. And I'm also exceptionally excited about this conversation because you have had like a wealth of experience so far. You're someone who's done so many interesting things in landscapes that span literally every corner of India. And I'm sure you have numerous stories to share from each of your work sites.
Thank you so much, Ishika, for inviting me and good to see you. So, looking forward for all the fun chat.
So, why don't you start us off with telling us about some of the work you did in these places and your unifying motivation that took you to these places? Unlike so many people who I've spoken to on the podcast before, you have worked for wildlife and conservation exclusively through the people who interact with them, like right from the very beginning. So, what led you to the people and what made you stick to this kind of work?
So, I always like spending time with people and to just work with them with a better communication. So, I have worked with in different landscape, but I always like to work in rural landscape. The what I mean is about rural is it is not at all a protected area or no protected area around that landscape. It's totally to rural landscape. And I actually like to work on a ground to know the stories or experiences of a people who are sharing the space with wild animals on their daily basis. So for many times we usually see there are human wildlife negative interactions, conflicts, and other scenarios where we just put the blame on animal, that also people are creating problem in wildlife management. But at that time we are actually not looking at the experiences or the incidents happen on a ground, like which is they are not considered in management. So I always worked in rural landscape to know more about this ground uh, experiences of people. So in 2016, I was a part of a Janata Waghoba program with the WCS India. And uh, in rural landscape, it is hard to explain that why wild animals are present in these such landscapes. And in such landscape, people are usually don't know how to deal with the wildlife presence as compared to the people who are sharing space uh, near the protected area or near the forest. So I remember one story that actually describes how the acceptance of this wild animals is there amongst the people in rural landscape. Also, I would like to tell you before starting the story, the small component of that program was to create leopard ambassador who were the school children or a college children, college students, and we usually gave all the information on the leopard biology and the precautionary measures to avoid any negative interactions with leopards based on the incident happened before in that landscape. Uh, and the main objective was to share all this information to the adults or the villagers through the leopard ambassadors. And later, that activity became a part of the curriculum of that schools or college in that landscape. So it became the part of a curriculum of the education system in that landscape. So so once these ambassadors were sharing the story, sharing these precautionary measures with their relatives and other villagers in their farm. So they were all the ambassadors were sitting in the farm and chilling with the ladies of the house, and some of the older ladies were also there, and they were having chat. These ambassadors were telling them the precautionary measures, and suddenly that lady said ki whatever they are telling us, that precautionary measures, that do some noise when you are entering to the farm, make some like put some music on your mobile phone, or and घुंगरू घुंगरूला काठीला घुंगरू बांधून ते ठोकत ठोकत जा. So it will make the noise or a sound, not noise. It will make the sound, and if there are any wild animals, they will definitely try to avoid humans. So she suddenly said, based on whatever they are saying us, I usually do the same thing whenever I go to the farm. I usually make some sound, or I usually started talking to myself. Is there anything? Is there leopard or anything? It will just go away. Okay, and she said once I would like to say this story in Marathi. So she was saying की मी जेव्हा पण जाते चालताना मी कधी पण गागतच जाते. जर तो असेल तर मी त्याला सावध करायचा प्रयत्न करते. एकदा मी मळ्यात जात होती आणि सरीतून सरी जाताना मला आवाज येत होता. जसा जसा तो सरीतून सरी दुसरीकडे जायचा तडातड ऊस मोडायचा. इकडून ऊस तिकडून ऊस. मग मी लिंबाच्या खाली उभे राहिले आणि बघते तर काय तिकडून आला बिबट्या. तर तो माझ्या जवळच होता आणि तो तसा सरळ सरळ निघून गेला. खालच्या बांधावर उतरला, लहान बांधावर उतरला आणि दुसऱ्या वावरात निघून गेला. तो माझ्याजवळ आलाच नाही. तो खूप जवळ होता, पण तो माझ्याजवळ आलाच नाही. आणि इकडे मी परत आले आणि मी तांब्यावर पाणी प्यायले. मला असं वाटलं की बाजूने सुन्याच चाललाय गवताचा भारा घेऊन. द सुन्या वॉज द his son or the worker from the farm. She thought there is a human who is taking some who is working in that farm, but that was a leopard. And she said I was scared, and I came and आजीच्या घरी मी तांब्यावर पाणी प्यायले. And at instant or at that moment, one younger girl from the college, she asked her, पण तू तर घाबरलीच होतीस ना? And she said, मी घाबरले, पण मी जेव्हा बघितलं तेव्हा घाबरले. जोपर्यंत तो मला दिसत नव्हता तोपर्यंत मला असं वाटलं की सुन्यात चाललाय. सो अँड देन द अनदर लेडी सेड की एकदा नाही का आपल्या गाईच्या जवळून गेला, पण त्याने त्याला काहीच केलं नाही. जसं हे सांगतायत की मोठ्या जनावरांवर तो हल्ला करत नाही, छोट्या जनावरांवर तो त्याच्या आवाक्यात ज्या गोष्टी पसतात त्याच्यात त्यांनाच तो पकडतो. तर ते तसंच आहे, पण त्यांनी आम्हाला कधी त्रास दिला Nice.
Translation time. Wherever I go, even when I'm walking, I keep singing something. And by doing so, if there is a leopard around, I try to make him aware of my presence. Once, when I was walking through a farm while crossing some water channels, I heard someone's movement. Every time they dashed across the channels, first on this side and then the other, breaking through the sugarcane crops everywhere. Then I stood under a neem tree and saw that a leopard came out from the other side. He was quite close to me, but he coolly moved along from one field to the other and then disappeared. He never came near me, despite being very close. I came back and drank a large pot of water. I kept thinking that it was Sonia walking alongside me, carrying a bundle of grass. A quick aside to let you know that Sonia was a young man she knew from the village who usually worked in these farms. But actually, it wasn't Sonia, it was a leopard. And so she continued with her story, saying that she returned to her grandmother's home to drink a large pot of water. And at that very moment, while she was telling us the story, a young college going lady who was also listening asked her, "But you must have still been frightened, right?" To which the woman replied, "I was frightened after I saw what it really was. Until then, I believed it was just Sonia walking." Another lady from the group then shared her story. "I remember observing that once the leopard had walked past our cow but did nothing to her. Just like these guys mentioned, they don't attack large animals and instead only catch the smaller animals that are within reach. The leopard has never harmed us." Back to Mrunal.
So it clearly, so they have the all people from the landscape, and uh, they dealing with this situation on a daily basis. They have the acceptance of the wild animals in their backyard or in their farms. So yes, this story actually fascinated me to know more about how these people are actually living with them peacefully. But I will also would like to say that whenever I see problems related to wildlife, those people who are creating problem, they are different, not from the landscape or not from the rural landscape who are dealing with this on a daily basis, and on a ground who are facing the problems are different.
That is such an incredible story because I think we don't realize as researchers that these little stories, which one may think are insignificant, just a sentence that someone says, could actually say so much about what someone thinks about the landscape they are in, how they actually feel about the history of their interactions. It's great that you've been able to collect and recall these stories and conversations which are so often overlooked. So, what else? Tell me a little more about. I remember you telling me about some very interesting things that you got to hear even during your work in Arunachal Pradesh, which is a completely different landscape from your work in Maharashtra, where you were working with leopards, and the fact that leopards or biptia they're coming into these landscapes where they're really far away from protected areas and they're still just existing with people, and you went from that landscape to a totally different one in Arunachal Pradesh. So wo kaisa tha, like tell me a little bit about that also.
So I started working with in the field in with NCF, and the first work I was associated with this occupancy surveys of hornbills in northeastern states, Nagaland, Tripura, Mizoram, Meghalaya, and Assam. So in every state or uh, in every area, like so all hornbills have a different names with respect to the different communities, and I we usually ask them about the hornbills, like how do you identify hornbill. If I ask them कौन सा हॉर्नबिल देखा था या फिर कितना बड़ा था, उसका कितना किलो था, मतलब हाँ वेट कितना था, कितना किलो था, कौन से रंग का था। तो वो अपने अपने इसमें लाइक लैंग्वेज में और व्हाटएवर दे हैव दैट इंफॉर्मेशन, वो कहते थे कि काला या सफेद है, अदुमले अवार इन मिजोरम इट इज कॉल्ड ब्लैक एंड व्हाइट। और सम पीपल वर यूजुअली आवाज करके दिखाते थे, लाइक ki that was the oriental pied hornbill। और ग्रेट हॉर्नबिल का चोंच निकाल के दिखाते थे कि ऐसे वाला दिखेगा, जो बड़े चोंच का रहेगा, पीले रंग का रहेगा, वो ग्रेट हॉर्नबिल रहेगा। फिर वो जो व्रीथ हॉर्नबिल रहेगा उसको दागी दागी रहता है, ऐसे ऐसे करके दिखाते थे कि दागी दागी रहता है। और एक रहता है जो उसके साइड में दागी दागी रहता है। तो वो ऐसे ये करते थे, सम लाइक कि ऐसे ड्रॉ करके दिखाते थे कि अरे ये ऐसे दिखता है, ये वाला हॉर्नबिल यहाँ है। एंड दे हैव दैट इंफॉर्मेशन ना कि 7-8 किलोमीटर के बाद जाने के बाद, मतलब एक्चुअली इन नॉर्थ ईस्ट आई फील कि वो डिस्टेंस घंटे के हिसाब से, टाइम के हिसाब से बोलते हैं कि 7-8 घंटे के बाद अगर यहाँ पे जाओगे तो ये डायरेक्शन में आपको ये वाला हॉर्नबिल दिख जाएगा। ऑल्सो told me about this like many times, like many people told me that हॉर्नबिल, अगर एक हॉर्नबिल को, एक फीमेल हॉर्नबिल को मार दिया, तो फीमेल पार्टनर को मार दिया, तो दूसरा पार्टनर वही जगह पे आके बैठता है कि दे पेयर फॉर अ लाइफ टाइम।
Translation time. In every state and every area, each hornbill has different names based on the different communities. And we would usually ask people about hornbills, like, how do you identify a hornbill? So if I ask them, which hornbill did you see? How big was it? How many kilos did it weigh? What color was it? And in response, in whatever language they spoke locally, they would tell us the information they had about hornbills. Like if they were black or white, or adumle awar, like they say in Mizoram, or some people would imitate the sounds that the hornbills would make. For instance, ki 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 ki, which is the oriental pied hornbill, or they would act out the shape of a hornbill's beak, saying, you'll see one which has a big yellow beak, and that one will be a great hornbill. The wreath hornbill will have a wavy, jagged beak, and there's another which has waves along the side of its beak. And then some others would actually draw them out for us to share which hornbill they were talking about, or where they were found in terms of the time taken to get there. So in the Northeast, distance is measured as time or in hours, where someone may say, if you travel for about 7 or 8 hours in this direction, you'll be able to see this particular hornbill. Another interesting thing that people have told me is that if either the male or female of a pair of hornbill dies or is killed, the remaining partner will continually return to the same spot and stay there because they pair for a lifetime. Back to Mrunal.
So this is like this is the first experience I had in this field, and that time I realized like the vast, like the uh, tremendous information the people have, and it is just we need to share it with other people who are not there, जिनको पता नहीं है. It is just sharing the information from one group of people to another group of people, just to enjoy that information. That's it. And from that time I started liking working with people. So yeah, that was my first experience in Northeast.
Wow, I think वहाँ पे there are two things which are so life changing ना. एक तो उसका biodiversity and जो landscapes मिलते हैं वहाँ पे, and the fact कि people have so much knowledge locally सिर्फ उनके observations से या from their experiences. So I think it's very interesting कि you actually managed to get, like लोगों ने draw करके दिखाया कि these are the different species of hornbills that you get, and वो छोटे छोटे descriptions, very interesting. And thoda this, recently when I had gone to Assam and I was asking people similarly about the monkeys that they find in these areas, तो बहुत similar descriptions मुझे भी मिलते थे कि हाँ ये वाला इसमें लाल रंग रहेगा, ये थोड़ा गोल मटोल सा है, ये थोड़ा छोटा है, ये थोड़ा बड़ा है, ये ऐसा मुंह बनाता है. तो it's very interesting कि as somebody who knows the animals well, जब लोग उसको डिस्क्राइब करते हैं वैसा, इट्स नाइस टू सी. Oh, okay, so if you are describing that its tail is like this, yeah, its beak is like this, or its color is like this, so it must be this species that you're talking about. So that's also so interesting, what you're saying. And it's also
So
pretty
I
addictive, right? क्योंकि ऐसे और stories सुनने हैं, I want to know more, I want to talk to more people.
yes. So from this, I remember one story. Like, so in Assam, there are Assamese macaque also, and in that landscape, not about the Assam, but in that landscape, Assamese macaque is also there, and rhesus macaque is also there. So
Mhm.
people used to say, वो ज़्यादा मस्ती जो करता है ना, वो rhesus macaque है. दूसरा वाला ज़्यादा problem नहीं करता है. And with the Hulok gibbons also, the same story कि अगर पार्टनर को अगर मार दिया, किसी ने हंटिंग कर दिया, तो उसका पार्टनर वहीं पे आके बैठता है कि उसको मार दिया तो अभी मुझे भी मारो. So they also pair for a lifetime according to.
Wow, so fascinating, na? Because it's not just कि ये कैसे दिखते हैं, it's also observations about their behavior. So there's so much to learn from them. Yeah.
In the fiery leaf monkey, they used to call it as a chashma bandar because it has that white thing on around the eyes, and also it is also called dugdha harib bandar. It's like अगर वो दूध पिएगा तो कैसे मुंह पे लगेगा सफेद सफेद, तो वैसे वो है, इसके वजह से it is also called as that in that landscape.
Amazing, so fascinating. Um, so let me also ask you a little bit about some of the more recent work you've done. And I think with the Janata Waghoba program also, you interacted a lot with different age groups, na? Like बच्चों से लेके then to college students, and then even some of the elders in the community. और फिर बाद में you also did a lot of work with younger school children when you worked in environmental education. तो उसके बारे में भी थोड़ा बताओ. Like, what is it like to, of course, talking to adults and getting to know their local knowledge and interacting with them about conservation issues, and that is a very different experience. But what is it like to talk about these topics with young children जो एकदम छोटे हैं?
Okay, so again, there is a new story. So in Sinnar, in Nashik district in Maharashtra, there is a small school, like the primary school from first standard to fifth standard. So for the awareness program with schools, the message is generally based on their grades. Like for the first to fifth, it's the like not much about science. It is just to very general. For the from according to age group, the message is changing. The intensity of the information, and it's based on the science. It's for the higher age groups. So for the first to fifth standard, I was there just to have a nice chat and just to listen to them. So I generally asked them about, do you see a leopard? Like who all are saw, like who all are seen the leopards from the landscape? So, and I generally that was in my mind that no one had seen leopard because this was like a small kids. But one kid raised his hand, and he's like, and I was surprised, and I asked, "Did you see a leopard?" And he said, "Ha, मी वाघ बघितलाय." So in generally in the landscape, it is called wag, which is a general term for tiger and leopard. So I saw मी वाघ बघितलाय, and I was like, where did you see and when did you see? And he is like, मी एकदा माझ्या दादासोबत शेळ्या चरायला गेलो होतो डोंगरावर. And he just pointed that small hillock from the school. Like मी इकडे गेलो होतो आणि आम्ही बोरं खात होतो. आणि चालता 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 माझा दादा बोलला थांब. आणि आम्ही बघतोय तर काय, तर समोरच्या अशा सुकलेल्या लाकडावर, अशा झाडावर बिबट्या झोपला होता. म्हणजे बसला होता. आणि आम्ही दोघे एकदम थांबलो. त्याने आम्हाला बघितलं, आम्ही त्याला बघितलं आणि आम्ही दोघंही घाबरून, म्हणजे आम्ही पटकन पळत आलो खाली आणि तोही घाबरून पळून गेला. पण त्याने आम्हाला काहीच नाही केलं.
Translation time. The little boy told me, one day I went along with my brother to graze our livestock up the hill. As he pointed to the hillock from the school we were in, saying, we had gone right up there and we were eating gooseberries while strolling along idly when suddenly my brother said, stop. And I looked ahead of us to see what happened. And right in front of us, on some dried branches of a tree, there was a leopard seated. The two of us stopped in our tracks. The leopard saw us, we saw the leopard. We got scared and immediately turned around and returned downhill. At the same instant, the leopard was also frightened and turned back and ran away too. And the leopard didn't do anything to us at all. Back to Mrunal.
So this is also one of the interesting story I got to know from the kids. Like a small kid of a 4th or 5th standard, he also saw a leopard, like on their daily basis. It's like just to take their animals to graze in near their village or something. So that kind of, they know the animal is there. So as you had asked me about I had interacted with adults. So one of the objective of that program, Janata Waghoba program, was to engage with the different stakeholders. So the key stakeholders from that landscape were forest department, education department, media, then revenue department, the villagers, gram panchayats. So I usually interacted with all the stakeholders in that landscape, and it was very new for me to interact with the media. So usually we, in wildlife field or something, we generally don't talk to media people, but it is something else that, like recently I was just thinking about it, and I like it's good to release or engage media, or just to whatever the study reports and results in the newspaper or in magazines, which local people, layman can read about it. So that was really new for me. And media from the landscape, from local media, not as a regional, local media had started writing about it. Like, what could be the precautions you need to take in that landscape? uh, Excluding that animal from that landscape is usually not a solution for the human leopard or human wildlife interactions. So that was very new for me from that program.
Yeah, no, that I couldn't agree more with you. And I think, we need to definitely be talking to more different groups of people rather than just going to the same group जिनको already सब पता है या जिनका interest already है, like to actually go and say, okay, who doesn't have this information and how can we make this information available to them? It's a lot more hard work, but you're absolutely right. It's amazing that you've put that much time and effort over the years in doing that. And it always, your leopard work especially reminds me a lot of just watching the news as I was growing up, because in and around Mumbai, this is an area that has leopards and they've always been in the news. And when I think about my school days, जब न्यूज़पेपर में पढ़ती थी, there would always be very sensationalized news ना कि यहाँ पे leopard दिखा और leopard ने ये किया वो किया, and it was always like the leopard was this big villain and it was this massive story and everyone should be scared, and there was this, the manner in which the reporting was done was very fear inducing. And I know that you and especially and many of the people you worked with over the years in these areas, to sensitize the media about how this news should be shared. I can definitely see how that has changed. Now when something happens and it's reported in the paper, it's done in a very neutral tone. And that is, testament to a lot of the work that you guys have been doing. And it's amazing to see that change, over the years. And that over the last 20 years, there has been a very clear shift in how these kind of uh, events are reported in the media. And that's so important. And I think, like you're saying, tolerance isi se badhta hai, because you're like, yes, there are leopards in the landscape, but they're not doing anything to us. Or, it's not immediately like, oh, they're leopards, we have to be scared, we have to do something, there has to be a reactionary measure. So it's wonderful.
And actually, so when I started working with college students, so with this same as a part of the ambassador activity, so these students usually go to their parents, neighbors, villagers, to share this information on leopards, precautionary measures. So, and I wanted to know what kind of reactions or what kind of feedback from the people about this information. I wanted to know that. So I gave them a small information sheet that they wanted to. I wanted to know more about it. Like, how do you feel? How this information will be useful to you, or what new things you got to know from this information. And people usually, that was generally general feedback. So what we got from the people was ह्याच्या अगोदर मला काही आम्हाला माहितच नव्हतं. Like we didn't know about the leopards, what kind of animal it is, and we just knew that leopards eat humans, but now we got to know that humans are not their prey, and there are precautionary measures that we can take. So ह्याच्या अगोदर आम्हाला काहीच माहित नव्हतं, and now we got to know, and it's good, this information, and this precautionary measures will be useful to us in our daily activities, wherever we are working in farms, or in the night if we are going. It is just to uh, त्याला सावध करायचंय. तो जर आसपास असेल त्याला सावध करायचं. It is just make it aware that humans are coming. Definitely that animal will not create a problem. And this, there should be a continuous efforts uh, in the landscape, that many more people got to know about this, and then maybe the acceptance might increase that landscape towards the animal. And yeah, that's it. Hope for the best.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Mrunal, for sharing these stories with us. And I wish we had a little more time. But yeah, this is such important work. And I hope we can keep documenting these stories and hearing more from you over the years as well. I'm sure you're going to continue working in many diverse landscapes and bring those stories to us as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ishika. Thank you so much. It was really nice to share all these ground experiences on this platform. Yeah.
Thanks so much for lending your voice. So happy to have you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening.